Hello, everyone. We would like to open our arms and welcome everyone to the inaugural Center of Excellence Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Conference. It's virtual this year, and next year we hope it will be in person safely. So I just want to share that my name is Dawn Yazzie. My clans are Ye'itne Tachini, Ado Kiani Bashashin, Topaha Dashache, and Seminoles are my Nellies. I am coming to you from Navajo Nation in northeastern Arizona, and I will just welcome you here. Thank you for being here. We have a wonderful full 3 days packed for you. I got my background here, sorry. Full 3 days packed of information for you. And I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement and just a brief prayer. In Navajo way and many other indigenous cultures, tribal nations, we always start with good words and good thoughts, with our intentions of why we are gathered and convened today. So really quickly, with a quick prayer, I just want to call on Mother Earth, Father Sky, and all of the natural beings that have power, sun, moon, stars, the universe, the wind, the mountains, the streams, all of these sacred deities and beings be with us here today and the next 3 days so that we may have our open mind and open heart and think together and plan for our families and young children in our world, in our spaces, for all the peoples on Mother Earth. And I'd like to thank you and pray that we may continue this work in a good way. Thank you, Din Danaslinigi, and I have a land acknowledgement that I'd also like to read. This is the land acknowledgement from Georgetown University Indigenous Student Organization, Native American Student Council. As an institution dedicated to our Jesuit values, Georgetown University recognizes that the land we currently occupy was and still is the homeland of the Nakotchant and their descendants, the Piscataway Kanoi people. We acknowledge that these peoples and many others were forcefully removed and that this university's occupation is fundamentally tied to colonial development. We acknowledge that the consequences of this removal continue to affect the indigenous communities. We offer our gratitude for the land and her people as we learn, teach, work, and commune. The university celebrates the resilient strength and enduring presence of indigenous people demonstrated around the world. We are committed to supporting the indigenous members of our community as we educate ourselves on indigenous histories, cultures, and issues. This is a reflection of our commitment to the values of people for others as we form our community in diversity. Again, this is from the Georgetown Native American Student Council. And in the chat, my colleagues will put a website where you can look at where you are, put in your zip code, and you can see the indigenous peoples that occupied the land before and currently. And I would encourage you as an organization, wherever you are, to, if you not have done so already, build your land acknowledgement as well. And in addition to this website, there are other resources, documents on helping you to develop your own land acknowledgement for your organization. And just really quickly, with another brief land acknowledgement that I like to do as well, is just look outside where you are. If you have a window, if you don't have a window, imagine how it looks now. What is the weather? Do you have clouds, the wind, the sun? Are there trees nearby the building? And the building, the land that the building sits on, the land under the pavement. Think about those, imagine those, hold those in mind. If you see mountains and streams, rivers, all of these places are sacred places to indigenous peoples. All of these places are offering places where indigenous peoples offer prayers before us and also currently. Today, there are indigenous peoples that still provide offerings and prayers to these places. So I just want to acknowledge that as well. We will continue to do so for many generations to come. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our inaugural conference.
Thank you, Dawn, for that very powerful and moving introduction to our conference, and welcome everyone as you are joining us to the inaugural conference of the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation. We are just delighted you are all here. We are very lucky not only to begin today's plenary and this week's conference with Dawn Yazzie's beautiful prayer and land acknowledgement, but also with a mindful moment, which will be led by the wonderful Travis Spencer. So I'm going to give you guys an introduction to Travis, and then I will turn it over to him so that we can begin our conference being centered and focused on self-care. Travis Spencer is a mental health therapist and mindfulness teacher and facilitator. Over the years, he has generously dedicated himself to serving Black and Indigenous people of color through counseling teens, adults, children, and families. Travis is a mental health coordinator for Inward Bound Mindfulness Education retreats in Virginia and California, with a mission to provide in-depth, highly relational mindfulness programming for youth and the parents and professionals who support them. Additionally, Travis has established multiple organizations, including founding the Institute of African American Mindfulness, a healing and wellness organization that supports the natural capacity of African Americans and allies to live in an inclusive community devoted to mindful living. He has also established mindful teen circles at Georgetown, mindful teens of color at Maya Angelou Academy, and the mindful teens of color at Taratibu Youth Association. The Mindful Teen Circles mission is to create an inclusive, healing-centered community of practice that employs mindfulness to support the psychosocial development of teens. And the Mindful Teens of Color at Taratibu Youth Association, it supports teens by creating a mindful environment to foster physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being. Travis is a graduate of Trinity Washington University with a Master of Arts degree in clinical mental health counseling. Travis fosters ongoing relationships and partnerships with Educare DC and Insight Meditation Community of Washington, DC. He's an active member of the Early Childhood Innovation Network at MedStar Georgetown, which is called ESIN. And without further ado, we are so grateful to be able to begin with Travis in a mindful moment.
Good morning and much peace and love to everyone. So I would like to invite everyone to find that comfortable seated position for themselves if they haven't already, allowing their feet to be flat on the floor, allowing your hands to be on your knees, your thighs, or interlocking your fingers and allowing them to lie in your lap. Whichever feels most comfortable for you at this time, inviting you to do so. And what we're going to do for our mindfulness practice this morning is we're going to ground ourselves first, and then we're going to do a compassion practice to support you as you move throughout this wonderful conference, learning some wonderful information and being with your colleagues. So let's begin. Once you're in your comfortable position, allowing your eyes to close. Coming into the present moment by noticing the sound of my voice, noticing sounds in the space where you are. Gently shifting from sounds to your breath, noticing your inhales and noticing your exhales. We'll begin this practice with 3 deep breaths, inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth, and inviting you as you exhale to allow your shoulders to fall away from your ears and rest in place. Beginning now, inhaling deeply, exhaling. Inhaling deeply again. Exhaling. One more time, inhaling deeply. Pausing. And exhaling. Inviting you to allow your breathing to return to its normal cadence. Inhaling, noticing the breath. Exhaling, and gently scanning and noticing your body. Inviting you to notice sensations as they rise and fall. Noticing your feet grounded at this time. Whatever surface your feet are touching, noticing and allowing. Noticing your hips and bottom. Noticing the movement of the belly. And noticing the rise and fall of the chest. On your next inhale, inviting you to notice your breath. But as you exhale, inviting you to bring to mind an image of yourself. Maybe imagining looking in the mirror and seeing an image of yourself. And if you feel comfortable, inviting you to bring up an image of yourself when you were 5 years old. Looking at yourself, maybe imagining the smile of a 5-year-old, imagining your eyes, imagining your face. And once you have the image of yourself in mind, inviting you to recite the following to yourself. I am protected. I am safe. I am loved. I am protected. I am safe. I am loved. Inviting you back to your breath and body as you allow the image of yourself to fade from your mind's eye. Inhaling, noticing the breath. Exhaling, and noticing your body. On your next inhale, inviting you to notice your breath again. And as you exhale, inviting you to begin bringing to mind those that are a part of your community. Maybe imagining your colleagues, co-workers, those who are patrons of the organization that you work for. Maybe bringing to mind the parents. Expanding that out a little further to include the children that you work with as well. And the communities that you are a part of. Once you have the community in mind, inviting you to include yourself, reciting the following. We are protected. We are safe. We are loved. We are protected. We are safe. We are loved. inviting you back to your breath and body as you allow the image of your community and all its members to fade from your mind's eye. Inhaling, noticing your breath. Exhaling and gently scanning and noticing your body. On your next inhale, inviting you to notice your breath. And as you exhale, inviting you to bring to mind your ancestors. Inviting you to imagine the ancestors that came before you that you know, or bringing to mind ancestors that you don't know. Imagining your ancestors looking down on you or looking at you at this moment. And sharing the following words. You are safe. You are protected. You are loved. You are safe. You are protected. You are loved. Inviting you back to your breath and body as you allow the image of your ancestor to fade from your mind's eye. Gently checking into the body. Noticing the rise and fall of the chest. Noticing the belly. Cultivating awareness. On your next inhale, noticing the breath again. And as you exhale, inviting you to bring to mind a higher power or source energy, the creator, and once you have the image in mind, whatever that feels like to you, or whatever you imagine, once you have that in mind, imagining that energy reciting the following to you. You are protected. You are safe. You are loved. You are protected. You are safe. You are loved. Inviting you to allow the image of the individual or the creator or energy that you've brought to mind to fade from your mind's eye. Noticing the breath and body. Inhaling, noticing the breath. Exhaling and noticing the body. On your next inhale, inviting you to notice your breath. And as you exhale, inviting you to take your right hand and place it at your heart center, allowing your fingers to spread out, cultivating awareness of the sensational touch of your right hand on your chest. Noticing the rise and fall of the chest as you're breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, I am protected. Breathing out, I am safe. Breathing in, I am loved. And breathing out. As you're breathing in, noticing the breath. As you're breathing out, allowing the body to relax. Shoulders falling away from the ears. Your breath evening out. Allowing yourself to be grounded in this very moment, at this time. Whenever you're ready, inviting you to allow your eyes to open, coming back into the space where we are right now. I appreciate you allowing me to provide such a wonderful practice. Thank you.
And we thank you very much, Travis. That was not only a great source of peacefulness and centering as we get started, but very inspiring as we call to mind the children, our communities, our ancestors, and our spirituality. So thank you so much for that. And it is with a new mindset and a calmer body and mind that I will introduce our wonderful plenary speaker, Dr. Eva Marie Shivers. So I want to tell you a little bit about Eva. She is the executive director of Indigo Cultural Center, a nonprofit action research firm located in Phoenix, Arizona. Dr. Shivers' work at Indigo Cultural Center focuses on the developmental niche of early childhood development and education to explore the evolution of frameworks for understanding families' culturally adaptive responses to poverty, systemic racism, and historical marginalization. Prior to relocating to Arizona, Dr. Shivers was a faculty member at the School of Education at the University of Pittsburgh. She received her PhD from UCLA's Department of Education, Psychological Studies and Education. Dr. Shivers also holds a law degree from Howard University School of Law and a BA in English Literature from Arizona State University. Dr. Shivers has numerous peer-reviewed publications and presents her research on equity, childcare, mental health consultation, and other professional development initiatives throughout the country. She has served as principal investigator on many childcare studies that involve collaborating with community agencies, national organizations, as well as state and county administrations. Racial equity is central to all research, evaluation, and training efforts. Dr. Shivers, a 0 to 3 leadership fellow, is firmly rooted in the world of infant mental health. Dr. Shivers has also served as faculty for the Harris Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Training Institute in Phoenix, Arizona for 6 years. She has numerous publications in the field of infant mental health and frequently presents her infant mental health research throughout the country. Dr. Shivers and her team at Indigo has led or consulted on many evaluations for IECMHC programs. A frequent keynote speaker, Dr. Shivers currently provides early childhood racial equity training and consultation to early childhood mental health community agencies and state departments around the country. For the past 19 years, Dr. Shivers has provided racial equity and research policy consultation to federal, state, and local government agencies and administrators. Eva is a proud mama of 10-year-old son Elijah. Their favorite things to do together are playing Jedi Warrior pretend play, trying new recipes, and riding bikes around the neighborhood in the morning. On a personal note, I just want to note that I've had the pleasure of working with and learning from Eva for years now. She is an inspiring and talented researcher and advocate who truly lives out her values. Her energy and passion have uplifted me and many others, and she has taught me a great deal about how the work of consultation and the evaluation thereof can be powerful forces for creating more equitable early childhood experiences and services. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Eva Marie Shivers.
Hey, thank you so much, Annie. Thank you for your kind words also. And I'm really happy that you were the one to introduce me. You've done so much also to really advance the equity agenda for infant and early childhood mental health consultation in our country. So I'm going to share my screen now. And I just want to kind of check in. We still have a hard stop at 5 after the hour. Is that correct?
That will be our time to turn it over to questions.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I am very grateful that we have had the chance to start off in stillness and in meditation. Let's see here, let me just, there we go. There we go. All right, so this is a beautiful, Dawn, your blessing and land acknowledgement, and Travis guiding us through that really loving, compassionate exercise of stillness really does set us up for what I'd like to talk to you all about this morning. We are going to be talking about healing justice and the world of infant and early childhood mental health consultation, and what we've been up to. What are we doing to promote racial equity? And in our work at Indigo, we talk a lot about promoting racial equity from the inside out. I am going to really channel the moment of stillness that we had with Travis, and I'm going to resist the urge to feel really urgent about needing to get through all my slides. And so I am just going to share with you some highlights of the work that we've been doing. And more than anything else, my goal for today is really to hopefully set you up to be present to yourself in a very specific way as you are sharing space with me this morning, and also moving through the rest of your sessions in the conference. And so yes, in this work, my goal is to meet people where they are, exactly where they are in the very moment we begin to share a space together. So here we are at the opening of this amazing conference in infant and early childhood mental health consultation, focused on equity. The title of this conference is Equity from the Start. Yes, I am feeling so very grateful and excited that the Center of Excellence is hosting this event. For those of you who have known me for quite some time, I have been really fighting to really center racial equity in our work for a very long time. And this conference represents a really big moment, I think, not just for mental health consultation, but I believe that it is reflective of what is happening in the country, and reflective of what's happening in our field of infant and early childhood mental health in general. So how will we prepare ourselves for today? How will we prepare ourselves for this conference, where equity will be focused? You're going to hear a lot of people talking about race and culture and DEI work, and you're going to hear lots of acronyms, and hopefully we'll be really careful to spell out those acronyms as we're talking. Maybe some of you might be new to this work, and that's exciting too. No matter where you are on your journey, welcome. And what I want to say with you today is that my stance also involves not only meeting you where you are, but part of what that entails is that I know we're all at different places on this developmental continuum of, fighting for justice and fighting for, a world where race is not always predictive of awful outcomes for children and families and communities. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on on more of the negative statistics around children of color. I'd like to introduce an additional way of being in this work and thinking about this work. My stance is also that I do not expect you to agree with everything that I say. And some of you might have heard me say this before. I think it's way more interesting if you can set your stance up to really listen for yourself and have a stance of kind of inquiring, okay, does this land with me? Is this something that resonates with me? Or is this something that I'm not quite so sure about? Pay attention to yourself, pay attention to what has heart and meaning for you. Something else I think is important for you to know is that I do focus a lot on race when I give these kind of talks and when I do my training. And it does not mean that I'm not aware of the more nuanced intersectionalities that are the realities of all of us. I almost artificially focus almost exclusively on race. Race continues to be a very painful topic, a painful experience. We have embodied race in many ways that are not always apparent to us. And it will take a lot of focus and a lot of intentionality to undo what is inside all of our bodies. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of what we'll explore today, some of the current context of the work we're doing around the country in mental health consultation equity. I'd like to review our framework. For many of you, this might feel familiar, and I'm going to encourage you to always look for learning. Like that's one of our group agreements we have when we come together. Look for learning. You are responsible for your own development in this area in particular. And so for those of you who are new, this is kind of our framework, the way that we approach the equity work in mental health consultation. Definitions, I know it might sound boring, but having a shared language is essential for this work. That also expands to ideology. What are these constructs that everybody's talking about? I'd love to share with you some research highlights that have helped move our agenda forward in some mighty ways. And really think about how in our work with mental health consultation, we can continue to expand our equity lens beyond the doing of equity and including more and more the being. Like, how are we be in this work? How do we be? And then where do we go from here? So I'm going to share with you very quickly. I'm not going to show these screens for you to take it all in. This is really just meant as a snapshot for you to get a sense of the breadth and scope of what is happening out there. So in terms of the evaluation and research that we've been involved here at Indigo, and I know there are many others who are doing more, we've worked with many states and cities and counties in conducting evaluation and research. And some of those evaluations we've served as the lead evaluation team, and some we have consulted. And for those of you who are interested, who might be new to this work or interested in compiling your reports, please reach out to us. We can share those reports with you as well. A lot of my work in the past, I would say 4 years, has been in addition to the research and evaluation, is really holding space for others in our workforce to expand their capacities and confidence around integrating more racial equity. We've worked with Arizona, our longtime partner, for really, really long time, and Michigan, Washington, Oregon, and more. Also, we've done trainings other places too. These are some of the highlights. On a national level, there are groups that have really advanced the equity agenda. I was a member of the RAIN group for a number of years. A really exciting study that Georgetown led, looking at the intersection of family, friend, and neighbor childcare and mental health consultation, which for those of you who have heard me speak before, you know that I get on my soapbox when I talk about family, friend, and neighbor childcare. This is a really big issue in our field that has we don't have a lot of systemic support for. And when we think about childcare providers and the children in those care, very marginalized experiences if they're not part of a system. So how can we work to expand our services to reach all those providers and children? We work very closely with the Center of Excellence for a number of years. And then also here at Indigo Cultural Center, more and more we are hosting national conversations and releasing written work and garnering more and more momentum on equity issues. But I will tell you that we are turning our attention more and more to the infrastructure. How do we support our infrastructure so that our workforce at all the levels, from leadership to policymakers, funders, supervisors, consultants, our communities, that we all are prepared to integrate an equity lens into our work more and more. Okay, so why did I share that with you? Part of it, showing off, ego, maybe, I don't know. But really why I shared that with you is to understand, the work is happening, and we could go straight into the doing part of the work. Okay, great. racial equity, mental health consultation. What do we have to do? I think I'm not going to make a whole lot of assumptions and say that everybody here in this conference today is already on board, fully embracing the racial equity message. There might be some of you who are wondering, well, why would I need to do that? Let's say, for example, if I'm in a community that's mostly white or monolithic in terms of culture and ethnicity. So, we still have a long way to go with bringing people together, and not in a way to kind of beat them over the head, like, okay, you're a mental health consultant, now go forth and do equity, say these things, do these things. Look, we have amazing resources that have been developed already. I'm looking right here on my desk. I have this amazing book, Don't Look Away, authored by some of my friends in the field. There are amazing resources for those of us who work with teachers and administrators and children and families. Our ability to advance the equity agenda is not necessarily because we have a dearth of strategies. Integrating equity is not an intellectualized exercise that involves just the doing of it. And for those of us who have been part of the infant mental health field for a while, we know that how you are is just as important, if not more so, as what you do, right? Jerry Paul brought us that really important truism in our work, how we are. So how are we in our work? And what does it take to really set the stage to integrate an equity lens in a meaningful way, not performative way, not a ultra woke hitting you over the head, shaming you way, not sticking your head in the sand and saying it, but like you're really afraid of, no. How do we prepare ourselves to enter into conversations and relationships and consultative alliances that enable us to really co-construct these healing relationships that lead to meaningful change for children and families? How do we prepare ourselves? How do we open space for our colleagues? If you are in a leadership position, how do you create policies and strategies and an organizational culture that really enables your workforce to do this work in a meaningful way that really translates to change? So I am going to focus with you more on the preparation. You have to know how is it that we need to be with one another. So our framework that has evolved over the years, and this framework has really evolved out of me just kind of not really knowing what I was doing when I first committed to talking more about race. I really just was committed to doing it. I hadn't had a whole lot of training in how to hold space or how to be a facilitator. I learned along the way, alongside of many of you, and I have learned my most important lessons from many of you that we've partnered with over the years. So we have these different levels. I think I love alliteration. I'm an English major. All the I's, all these, and so we're going to go through each of these levels. So in terms of mindfulness and healing, we began our session today with a beautiful moment of stillness. And indeed, one of I like all the tenets, all the diversity informed infant mental health tenets. I'll show you more of those a little bit later on if you're not familiar with those. But I do love this first one. Self-awareness leads to better services for families. Indeed. And it is that first tenet that is going to guide the themes of our work today, of my session with you today. And so this first level, like the individual or the internal level, we talk a lot about how do we act from the center. We talk a lot about embodied mindfulness, embodied healing, and there's a lot of parallels in our field as we understand things like how is trauma healed? How is it held in the body? Well, it's the same kind of mechanism when we talk about healing these racialized experiences that we all have. One of my favorite quotes is by my guru. Well, she probably doesn't know she's my guru, but I've claimed her as my guru. Her name is Reverend Sensei Angel Kyoto Williams. And she brings together the notions of love and justice. And I remember the first time I heard her speak and the first time I read her words, something in me lit up, something in me screamed, yes, that is the way. And so I think in the years that have unfolded since then, maybe that was around, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, in the years that have unfolded, it's been a continued meditation on love and justice. And what in the world does that even have to do with infant mental health and mental health consultation. So we do things like we situate ourselves in a conversation. So for today, for example, who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? Well, in a beautiful way, both Dawn and Travis started already doing the work of asking ourselves, how are we locating ourselves? How are we situating ourselves in this conversation? And these 4 essential questions I come back to over and over and over and over again, and exploring the answers to these questions will look different for me every day. It will look different for you every day. But if you have a moment of situating yourself in a conversation before you begin it, it really opens up another portal for being with yourself and with your colleagues in a different way. So I'd like to share a little bit about who I am, because who I am absolutely frames and colors and explains what you're going to hear me say. And it's the same for every single speaker you're going to hear from today and for the rest of this conference. Who are you? So I'm going to share just a little bit about my story, just so that you understand that the things I say are informed by my experiences, my worldview, what I care about. And it's the same for all of you. So I identify as an African-American cisgendered woman. I grew up in the 70s in Tempe, Arizona. We were the first Black family to integrate our neighborhood, the first Black family at our elementary school. I was born, 3 years after the US versus Loving Supreme Court case. So that Supreme Court case made it finally legal for a Black person to marry a white person. Before that, it was illegal and you could go to jail for that. I was born 3 years after that decision. So I was born in an era where interracial relationships and we're definitely still a taboo and something you didn't see very often, definitely not in Tempe, Arizona in the early 70s. And so my identity as a Black woman was really shaped for me by the time and space in which I grew up. Being the first Black family in our neighborhood at our school, there were a lot of early racialized experiences I had that shaped my identity in really profound ways. Another really key part of my identity is me being a mom. I have a beautiful son. His name is Elijah. He's 10 years old. We adopted him from foster care when he was a baby. He has beautiful dark brown skin. He has these locks that he's growing. He is exuberant, and has a wonderful imagination and is very inquisitive. He is also on the spectrum and has dyslexia. He has this beautiful mind and looks at the world in ways that are very different from me. And being in a relationship with him and watching him grow and learn has shaped the way I see the world too. I recently started homeschooling him, and that has been a really big challenge in many ways I can't even begin to go into, but it also does shape the way that I see this work. I won't go into that too much, but being Elijah's mom absolutely is one of the reasons why I am here today. Another big piece of my identity is as a researcher and evaluator. I do work at the crossroads of infant mental health and early care and education. And so doing research and evaluation in this space of mental health consultation is that is my sweet spot for sure. And it is important for you to know this about me. I see data and research and evaluation as a portal. I see it as a portal, as an opening, as a doorway, as a way to understand or see something that can move us to further action, or can move us to further understanding, or can move us to ask more and more questions. So for me, data is a very powerful portal in my life. I'm also a dancer. I danced professionally for a number of years, and here in Phoenix and DC and Los Angeles and New York. And I currently practice yoga a lot. So I'm in my body a lot. That's, I think, one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to this notion of embodied healing and paying attention to where things live in our body. I see this equity work as healing work. I don't see it as an intellectual thing to be trained on. I really do see it as healing work. And seeing it as healing work is also deeply, deeply connected to my spiritual beliefs. I want to be explicit and transparent about that. And I would invite all of us to be also more and more transparent and explicit about what brings us to this work and how do we see this work. And because I see this work as closely tied to my spiritual life, it opens me up to integrating ways of knowing, traditional ways of healing that have been around for centuries and thousands of years, way before our current Western paradigms called it infant mental health, these ways of knowing. So, I'm going to just back up for a second. So when we start by asking ourselves, who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? When you spend time answering those questions for yourself and perhaps sharing those answers with other people, you see how it opens up a conversation in a different way. So now when I am talking with my friend Dawn, and she and I are talking about infant mental health consultation, and we know each other's stories and we've located ourselves, when we talk about other ways of knowing, other ways of learning, other ways of healing, it feels like a more integrated conversation. And I don't look at her and say, that's not infant mental health. And she looks at me and says, nope, that's not what reflective supervision is, or that's not infant mental, we understand that there are multiple ways of knowing because we've taken that time to develop that relationship where we locate ourselves. So, starting these conversations from a place of center, from a place of grounding, from a place of stillness. We started this work with Travis leading us through a moment of stillness. And, I often do that also with many of the groups that I facilitate. And I encourage other facilitators to do the same thing in their own way. Khadijah Johnston and I are currently co-facilitating a community of practice. This community of practice was originally started by the Center of Excellence, and we picked it up and continued it. And this community of practice is a beautiful, diverse group of current and emerging leaders in the space of infant and early childhood mental health consultation, strong focus on equity. And so each month now we ask one of our members of the group to lead us through a grounding or a moment of stillness. And oftentimes I ask, okay, why do we do that? What is coming up? Why are we doing that? Why do we think that's important? And I'd love to just to share with you some of what they've shared with me and Khadijah over the months. So some of our members have said things like, well, we start with stillness, we start with grounding because it prepares us to have an embodied experience as we talk, right? Then it's easier for us to identify when something kind of emerges that needs to be attended to. We start from a state of stillness rather than from chaos and organization. Another member of our group, she said, breath is radical. She says, especially when we're thinking about bringing into predominantly white institutionalized power structures. Breath is radical. Breath is the one thing we can control. Breath, breathing. It is connected to dismantling white supremacy. It's a practice that many communities of color have had for a very long time. And now we're bringing in others, we're bringing in more and more white people too, so that they can stay in the conversation with us. We all get dysregulated. We all feel uncertain. Often talking about race can feel disruptive. Breath allows us to sit with that discomfort. It also upends our notions of what's professional, right? We're starting our conference off with breathing and with a prayer. And I love that we started off this way. We're starting with almost this embodied way of acknowledging, yes, there are many ways of being in this work. Our work is ultimately healing work. How do we get there? Well, breathing is one modality, right? Being in our bodies is another. Sharing who we are is another. So I have this theory that mindfulness and mental health consultation are uniquely situated. Like, I think that folks who practice infant and early childhood mental health consultation are uniquely situated to be really good at dismantling bias and attending and attuning to race. And I am gonna just shift gears real quick. I'm gonna scroll through some slides really quickly to get to some research that I'd love to share with you. Time is very quickly winding up. But I'm not going to go too fast because I do want you to kind of see these images. I was going to tell you a little bit about mindfulness and why do we focus on the inner work of social justice. There is a really important reason, and acting from the center. You see here our inter and intra group level. We talk a lot about narrative healing and shared language, increasing our racial literacy, the role of narrative in racial healing. I guess the one that I would want to highlight here is that talking is a form of action, a precursor to decisions, right? A precursor. And so when we are sitting and sharing stories and we think, well, when are we going to get to the work? Well, this is the work. And for those of you who are supervisors, and for those of you who are mental health consultants, that's a big part of what we do is we listen to stories. Narrative is a part of that healing experience that we offer others. Definitions are definitely important. And I've been using the word racial equity. Well, let's take a look at this definition. The definition is I think, aspirational and hopeful in its essence, this definition, right? It's the substantive alternative to structural racism. Racial equity is a social outcomes picture. So for me, that means often it means data, in which race is not consistently associated with privilege and disadvantage. The goal of racial equity is to produce fairness, justice, where race would no longer be a factor in how we assess merit or how we distribute opportunity and resources. That definition is provided by the Aspen Institute. And then it's also a process. It's not just like, oh, are we going to get there? This goal that's out there, always seeming on the horizon. It's also a process that also taps into how we will get there. This will always be a challenge, I think, for all of us. It's a process whereby those who are most impacted by racial inequity are meaningfully involved in the creation and implementation of policies and practices. This continues to be something that is very, very difficult for us to do well. So many of our organizational structures are very hierarchical in terms of the leadership structure. I don't have to tell you, we like to have family engagement, but always looks a particular way and doesn't always feel terribly authentic. How are we meaningfully involving those who are most impacted by inequity? So it's a question that each of us ask based on the programs that we're in. And here too, working towards racial equity means it includes the process of working to address and confront the root causes, not just a manifestation. A key example of a manifestation, I think, is expulsion from preschool. That is not a root cause. A big part of our work, a big narrative in mental health consultation is that mental health consultation is effective at reducing and preventing suspensions and expulsion and, exclusionary, racialized disciplinary behavior. Well, okay, that is a manifestation of something that has deep, 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 deep roots. When we are about the business of doing equity as a process, we are looking at those roots. We are attending to those roots. We are healing those roots. So what might that look like in our world of mental health consultation? What would it mean to attend to the roots and to heal the roots, right? So it's a question that we continue to ask ourselves. Working towards racial equity, here we go. This includes the disruption of policies and practices and attitudes that reinforce differential outcomes or that fail to eliminate them. And that word disruption there, we are currently in a seismic cultural shift in our country and certainly in our field in mental health consultation. I do a lot of work kind of in the broader infant and early childhood mental health world. And many things are being questioned. Many things are being questioned. Reflective supervision. What do we mean by parallel process? There are many, so-called sacred cows that we are critically examining. And for many of us, it feels uncertain. It feels dysregulating. It can feel chaotic. It feels disruptive. And I think ultimately what is being disrupted also is power. Let's name power, the power that is at the center of, usually it revolves around power and economics, power and money, is usually at the center of inequities. Anytime we poke power or try to move it aside or ask to share power, something will feel disrupted. And so it's, again, coming back to our inner work. It's another reason why it's important to attend to the inner work of racial justice, because when that power gets poked, when it gets provoked, when it gets disrupted, even in the slightest, stuff comes up for us, for everyone. We need to have a practice that we can come back to stay centered, so that we don't either burn out or we don't completely disengage, or we don't get so angry that it ends up being unhealthy in our bodies. This is a big reason why we must have an inner practice. So very quickly, I think some of you have seen these images of understanding the difference between equality and equity. On this image, equality is everybody gets the same dose. If you're looking at the left side of the screen, it could be an intervention. It could be, let's say, access to mental health consultation. With equity, it's like, oh, let's consider other factors in determining how much dosage people get. Well, over the years, people thought this image was kind of problematic, for a number of reasons. The size of the children, the fact that there's a fence there, the fact that they all have white skin, the fact that the ground is equal and level. There are many reasons why people started poking at this and critiquing it, which is good and great. We should always be critical and enhanced in order to enhance our understanding. And so somebody came up with this image. You see the ground, this acknowledging that we don't all start out from the same playing field, right? That even the fence is taller on one end. The children are all the same size. Their ethnicity is, we can't really tell. And then there's justice, where they break down the fence, right? And they're working together to dismantle and tear down that fence. So there we go. Images can be really powerful in helping us understand a construct. So as we think of our collective well-being as a field, these are the narratives and the conversations we can be having too. Like, who are we? What do we stand for? Who are we? Where did we come from? This is, has a lot to do with reckoning with our history, reckoning with our past, and understanding the forces that shaped where we are today. Why are we here, right? And then where are we going? What is the common vision we have as a field, as a group, as a program, even in group supervision? We should be having these conversations at these higher levels. Those narratives absolutely shape our day-to-day work. Toni Morrison says narrative is radical. She says it's radical. It creates us at the very moment it is being created. It is radical, spending time in narrative. I'm doing a quick time check. Okay, I think I'm going to pass through these slides, and I would like to share with you something else. I'd like to talk about mental health consultation, and all of these are just, I wish we had more time together to explore these definitions around infant mental health, right? I've been really interested in going back to our history in infant mental health. And well, what is the definition of infant mental health? I think we use constructs and terms so much that I think it's helpful to revisit those original definitions, not to say, oh, that's the definition we should all use, but to even ask, does this definition still feel like the right one for us? And so I've been really interested in understanding our roots and our history. Zena, Charlie and Paula Zena, in their chapter in the 3rd edition of the Infant Mental Handbook, they define infant mental health as a multidisciplinary professional field. And it's a field that includes inquiry and practice and policy. And I love this, concerned with alleviating suffering, right? And enhancing their social and emotional competence. And it is interdisciplinary because of the complex, interrelated nature of our development and its deviations, right? It requires expertise and conceptualizations beyond the capabilities of any particular discipline. I remember when I first came to infant mental health, I felt like I finally found home because of its interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary nature. And what I also love about being in this field is that because we have started with this openness, expansive notion of what it means to be concerned about the well-being of children, it opens up already this other ways of knowing. There is not just one way. And I think sometimes we forget that. We emphasize one field over another. I mean, you know, and coming back to our roots and understanding the interdisciplinary nature reminds us that there are many ways of healing, many pathways to healing, and we are a stronger field when we open up our professional selves to the perspectives of others. And this is why diversity in our field is also so incredibly important, and having people to do the work who come from the communities and they know those traditional ways of healing. They know those traditional ways of holding love and compassion. You know, that is why I believe infant mental health is such a great place to be if you are concerned with the work of equity and justice in the lives of young children and families. If you aren't already familiar with the tenets here, you know, founded, and I would say funded also by the Harris Foundation, these tenets are also really integral to the work that we do with infant mental health, and they have beautiful kind of multi-day trainings on these. Definitely reach out to them if you're interested in learning more. These tenets guide our work at Indigo constantly. You see that first one on there about self-awareness. The fourth one is also one that I absolutely love: recognize and respect non-dominant bodies of knowledge. We don't have a whole lot of time for silent reflection, but I would like to share with you a little bit of the research. I do like to talk about Black children a lot, partly because that's where most of my research has been. I am African American, as is my family. You know, and it's not exclusive to the work that we do, but I do focus a lot there. And lately, I have been hearing from my African American brothers and sisters around the country, like there is a sense of weariness about hearing the same negative statistics about us and our children over and over and over and over again. And so I think that data is important. I mean, the data, I remember the first time I heard Walter's study around preschool expulsion and Black boys. I remember where I was the first time I heard that study. And that study, that data, propelled me in a way that led to a really big agenda that you hear about now. And I also know that it's important for us to uplift notions of freedom and love and justice and beauty and excellence when we think about Black children. You know, I stumbled across a really great webinar, and the researcher, she's from UCLA, what does love look like in the early childhood classroom? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. If you're interested, there is her name, and I think she has a book that's called Dare We Say Love. And I do think we need to all be talking more and more about love. So in our Smart Support evaluation, I'll talk about love and data and mental health consultation. We did a really in-depth evaluation, and it extended over, I don't know, over 4 years. We had lots and lots of data. And what we found, one of our overall findings, was that mental health consultation had an impact on closing racialized disparities in outcomes for African-American boys. Specifically, it closed that gap around conflict with teacher and also risk of expulsion. And we closed that gap, interestingly, even though maybe a handful of consultants said, yeah, no, I talk about race pretty regularly. Most of the consultants didn't. And for me, that started a journey of reflection, like, well, why did we see these racialized outcomes if folks weren't necessarily talking explicitly about race? Now, I want to be very clear, and I want you to hear me. If you hear this finding, it does not mean, oh, we're good, we don't need to talk about race. No, the question becomes, how do we build upon this finding to really enhance outcomes by being more and more explicit and intentional in the ways that we talk about race? Annie Davis, she introduced me this morning, also used our data to conduct a secondary data analysis, and she found a stronger consultative alliance, and that's exactly what it sounds like: an optimal consultant-teacher relationship. An optimal consultative alliance predicted a positive change in the outcomes that you see here. These are all great, right? Increased attachment, increased closeness with teachers, right? But only when the mental health consultant either shared the same ethnic as the teacher, or the mental health consultant had self-reported expertise in equity topics, okay? And so then it kind of opened up this other line of questioning. Oh, well, who does the work? That also matters. right? It matters in how they do the work, and that in turn affects outcomes. So you see how this data as a portal, data as a portal leads us to more and more questions, more and more, what is it that is shifting with mental health consultation? For so long, many of us have talked about the black box of mental health consultation. It's kind of a hard strategy and program and initiative to explain to others who aren't in our field, in our subspecialty. So these findings are portals to help us understand our theories of why things are changing. And then, very quickly, we also connected, when mental health consultation is implemented in childcare programs where there's a strong improvement in organizational climate. So now we're talking about programmatic mental health consultation, and that was rated by teachers. That predicted greater improvements in teacher self-efficacy, which in turn predicted reduction in child's risk of expulsion. So I love these findings also because it connects all the layers of our work. So the work that we do with the directors, we see how it ripples out with the teachers and then ultimately with children. So it's always connecting all those dots. So the big questions is, how do we understand the impact of consultation when we consider all of these findings? What are the mechanisms of change? We still have a lot to understand there. How do we build upon and enhance our impact on racism and anti-Black racism and other forms of racial disproportionality? How do we do that? So I'm bringing up a framework that Annie and Deb and Lauren developed in one of their articles from 2019. I love this one. This was from, if I'm correct, yes, this was from a series of interviews, I think, that Annie did with many of us around the country, and came up with this awesome a framework that you see here, the consultative alliance on the left side, what's involved with the consultative alliance. All of then it leads to enhanced reflective capacity and changes in teachers, which then reduces the influence of bias and hopefully ultimately impacts expulsion rates. Well, my question is, what happens before this big oval on the left? How do we get here? How do we support a workforce and a program and a grantee organization to be the sort of place where we can co-generate ways of being with consultants and supervisors to get them to this place of having this really strong consultative alliance? And so much of our work has focused on what comes before this oval so that we can do the rest of these wonderful things that you see in these circles and arrows. So our systemic strategy, let's integrate more embodied mindfulness. That's one of the strategies. I'm going to go quickly through this. I guess the big point I want to make here is that, yes, we have awareness about race and also compassion practices. When I asked the consultants in Arizona, I said, why do you think that we closed some racialized gaps? And most of you weren't talking about race. What is it that you were doing? What do you think led to closing these gaps? And in their words, they said things like, well, we have these kind of relationships. We're leaning in. I see you. I'm holding your gaze. This parallel process, curiosity, self-awareness. We model and we try to promote presence in the here and now, as well as perspective taking and empathy, which supports compassionate action. I love this one. I know Khadijah loves that one too. These are compassion. I call this compassion practices. That might not be our language in infant mental health, but in the mindfulness world, that's a compassion practice. That sounds to me a lot like what's known as the consultative stance. I think many of you are probably familiar with these 10 elements. Some of you might not be. If you're not, I hope you become familiar. It's a way of being. It's a way of embodying the role of a consultant in order to get these really lovely, juicy outcomes. Yes, compassion practices. So where do we go from here? I do have some recommendations at these various levels. We have much work to do. I don't want to just say this is just the work of consultants. We need to get away from saying, okay, consultants, here's what we're giving you. Do this training, go through this self-study module, go forth and do equity. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. We need to back up. Let's look at our infrastructure transformation. That includes leadership development and an expansive view of leadership, that is not our current hierarchical top-down way of leading. It is a more inclusive way of leading. The workforce pipeline, this is one of the biggest issues talked about in the country Around mental health consultation today, this is one of the biggest implications for equity, is who is doing the work? Who gets to be the one going into communities doing this work? We must absolutely attend to our pipeline. And if we don't have one, we must build one. And while we're building it, we have to find creative solutions to deliver consultation in a way that matches where communities are, so that people feel seen and heard. So yes, you can tell I feel very passionate about that one. And so that has a lot to do with how we are with one another, right? When we're together with our colleagues in supervision, how are we having these conversations? There are amazing resources from the Center of Excellence. I love the competencies. I go to them all the time. I use them in many of the groups that I facilitate. There's a lot of anti-racism work happening in early care and education that is really great. And here at Indigo Cultural Center, we're developing more and more ways of building that capacity in the workforce. But I would say, first and foremost, always, 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 there is work for each of us to do on the inner level. We must relearn our history, even the history of infant mental health. Look at it through the eyes of decolonization, right? We need to understand where internalized oppression lives within us. We need to understand where internalized privilege lives within us. We need to understand whiteness and how that shows up in our work. We have to understand and connect the portals of capitalism and race and white supremacy. And those are scary words to say. I know I didn't define that term. We need to understand that term so that we're using it in the same way. That could help us cultivate healing, right? And I will say this over and over again. If you do not have a body practice, cultivate one. A body practice could be daily meditation. It could be a walk outside. It could be yoga. It could be prayer. It could be art, meditative kind of Zen art, I don't know, but develop a way to be still in your body so that when you need it in the moment, you have that repertoire, you have that muscle that's been developed. Okay. And of course, we come back to love. We come full circle. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you do not see. So how are you in your life, in your world, being loved by others, meaning maybe others might come to you and make you conscious of things that you do not see. How do you create spaces where we can have these kind of conversations, these loving conversations, where we can all collectively raise our consciousness about these issues? I'm going to skip the video for today. This was also introduced to me by Khadija. I love it. Pandemic is portal. You can see a big theme for me these days is connecting portals and jumping through portals and weaving together different portals. When we integrate non-dominant bodies of knowledge, we're portal jumping. We're weaving portals together. Take a look at this video if you have the chance. It's called Pandemic is Portal. It's wonderful. And just as a reminder from Mr. Cornell West, yes, justice is what love looks like in public. If you are concerned with racial equity and social justice, you are concerned with love. It is not just an intellectualized exercise. It is something that lives in our bodies. It is us returning to ourselves. It's us returning to one another. So I'll end there for now. Please do write down my email. I hope that I can hear from you. If you have cool resources that you think I'd like, send them my way. That's how I get all my best resources. It's from all of you. If you have questions about our work or want to connect with us and support the work that we're doing, definitely reach out to us. Annie, I don't know if we have time for questions. I know that I'm definitely over. So let me know.
Yes, happy to let you know. So everyone, this session technically does end at Eastern Time, 12:15, which is right about now. And it's followed by a 20-minute break. We'll reconvene at 12:35. Nevertheless, I'm assuming there are some folks who would love to do some Q&A right about now. So we're just hoping to extend a few moments for Q&A, understanding that folks are more than entitled to their breaks. Please go and do what you need to do. If you'd like to stay on and ask some questions, that would be very, very wonderful. I think we have one so far that I think would be great to talk about. One of our attendees asks, I am only recently becoming aware of the expulsion of Black preschool children. Do you feel like it's been happening and it is now being brought to light, or do you feel that it is happening more now compared to previous decades?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's an interesting, there are people around the country, you know, I think you're going to hear from Chantel. I'm not sure when. I think maybe tomorrow. I think, is that when Chantel is speaking? You're going to hear from Chantel and Walter Gilliam. So I know that Chantel will talk a lot about expulsion prevention. She was instrumental in bringing this policy awareness to states and communities around the country. And so a lot of us who have some funding to do some work around expulsion prevention are going around and kind of going on a tour. And a lot of us who do these kind of trainings, we present the data. And it is fascinating to hear people's perceptions of the data. And when I say people, I mean mostly like childcare administrators and teachers. And some people say, yep, that reflects what I see. Or some people say, no, I don't see that at all. I think there's a level of, I think there can be some denial around it. I think there's a level of, no, not us. Well, we don't do that. You know, there's a level of shame around it, but I don't know if it's happening more. I don't know. I think it's another reason why it's important for us to have some accountability in the programs that we do. We need to have some kind of a baseline number to know, you know, when you think about the definition of equity, it's a social outcomes picture. Well, let's get some baseline data to find out where we're starting. Let's try something different, measure it again and see if we've made any changes and close those racialized gaps. And so the data is one piece of it, but also it's like just the will and our internal ways of understanding this work and knowing that that is a manifestation. That is the tip of the iceberg, my friends. There is a huge body of ice under the surface that we need to attend to. So I think getting too caught up in those numbers around preschool expulsion does us a disservice. We need to look at ways of relating, practices around quality. We need to look at connections with families are a big one. I still think that we should have a really, really awesome, strong competency for consultants around community. And this notion was introduced to me by my friends and colleagues at the Jewish Board in New York City. And they had a competency around communities. And I think one of the elements of that was falling in love with the community that you're working in. You know, so, you know, we think about the work that's underneath the surface of expulsion when we support our mental health consultation workforce to be able to look beyond the surface. Oh, there's so much there that can be healed.
Thank you so much for that, Eva. And just want to share with you, I know you can't see the different portal, but there are lots of folks sharing that they thought this was a wonderful presentation, that they can hear your passion and that they're eager for more and more of this kind of content. So
yeah. Thanks, Annie. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I wish I was thinking about this last night. I wish we had a whole weekend together, just to talk about these issues and really sit together with these issues. And I know that many of the sessions might feel rushed today. And so I think that's okay for us to just to trust that what needs to get shared will get shared. And I don't know, I think it just means a lot that we are coming together, focusing on social justice and equity and mental health consultation. It means a lot. But yeah, having more space to really sit with this, you know, hopefully that's something you can do in your programs at you know, wherever you are, making the space to have these deeper conversations.
Absolutely. And I think that we have so much ahead of us in the next 3 days that this, you know, this eagerness, the questions that are coming in the chat, I'm so sorry we can't get to all of them. The general expressions of enthusiasm, this is exactly the right note to end on, having more questions, and as Dr. Shivers says, to trust that we are going to walk through this.
That's right.
We are going to have to wrap up this opening plenary for today. Next, there is a break that will end at 12:35 Eastern, and we will get started with our workshop sessions. So thank you so much, Dr. Shivers, for your very inspiring remarks, and thank you to everyone for being with us.
Yeah, thank you all. Take care. Thanks, Annie.